How do you motivate yourself at work? That's always a tricky thing, at least for me. I don't know how about you, but like getting motivated every day around what you do, even if you like doing it, is a tough call. And this might be one reason why the work engagement rates across North America and Europe are not that high, actually. So what can we do about it? Well, according to today's guest, we can use gamification. So remember that video game that maybe somebody else or yourself spent way too much time on? Well, it turns out there's certain mechanisms that we can use or that game developers use to make these games more motivating. Some might even say addictive. If you are interested how to use these mechanisms in your work, stay tuned for today's presenter. Hi, welcome to the School of Becoming. I'm your host, Ingo Raut, here at the School of Becoming. And together with Mensch Magazine, we were able to curate these interesting sessions that help us to think about work and professional development in times of uncertainty. Today's guest is Yu-kai Chou. Yu-kai is widely recognized as one of the pioneers of gamification. He wrote a book that has become somewhat of a standard, or a Bible if you like, in that realm, called Actionable Gamification, in which he outlines different gamification strategies according to a framework that he will introduce in this session called the Octalysis Framework. It can help you to understand the different dimensions in which you can motivate yourselves or others at work. The accessibility of that framework might be one of the reasons why large firms as well as governmental bodies and individuals rely on Yu-kai's knowledge when it comes to gamification and motivation. In order to make his learning accessible, he also created a learning platform called Octalysis Prime, which features over 700 videos. So what you will see here today is an introduction to gamification that you can use in your workplace. With that, welcome Yu-kai.
Thanks for having me. Very happy and excited to be here and share some of the work I've been doing. Cool. So let's begin. Today we're going to talk about frameworks of motivation and gamification. So I think that was quite a good background myself. Just to paint a little bit more color around this, I actually started working in the field now known as gamification since 2003. So it made me one of the earlier pioneers in this industry. Back then it wasn't called gamification, all that stuff, but now I run two companies, Octalysis Group, which is a consulting design company, and Octalysis Prime education platform. Last year, we did some calculations and saw that our design work for our clients have empowered over 1 billion user experiences. And the disclaimer is that's not necessarily 1 billion unique human beings, because let's say Lego, the same human being could be the customer of Lego, Volkswagen, and Microsoft, but we would count that as 3 separate users for practical purposes. I do a lot of these talks at Stanford University, Google, IDEO, Tesla. Actually, at Tesla, I actually did a talk relating to diversity and empowering women in the workplace kind of thing. So it's very related to what Ingo just brought up. And my work has been rated as a top expert in the #1 guru in the field of gamification for 3 years out of 4. And then afterwards, they made me a judge. So I guess I become disqualified to be a guru. And here's some of the companies that I've worked with. And the big thing is a lot of people think, oh, I do gamification, so I work with a lot of gaming companies, but that's usually not the case. You know, the only one is Scopely, which is a friend of mine who started the company. But usually companies that use gamification are things that are very important, very meaningful, useful, but rather boring, mundane, or intimidating. So things like finance, insurance, healthcare, education, work with a lot of companies that are very competitive too, like retail, online retail, where they really need to stand out, manufacturing, etc. So it's really about making mundane, boring things more exciting, more interesting. And so this is the theme where a lot of people, especially working remotely, people know they should do some sort of activities, but the motivation is a little bit harder. So this the framework becomes a bit more relevant. And as Ingo mentioned, I have a book, Actionable Gamification. You know, if you go to Amazon and you search gamification, I think it's the first result. So if the talk is interesting, you can go check it out. If you don't like to read a book, I have this gamified platform to learn about gamification. It's called Octalysis Prime. And this is where, like Ingo said, I made over 700 videos on it now about how the brain works, motivation, behavioral change, how persuasive technology and applied psychology and behavioral economics all tie together. This is still something pretty new I'm working on, but right now we have a 39% DAU, daily active user over monthly active user, which roughly translates to if you come on this website at least once a month, there's a 39% chance you're on it every single day. So Netflix is the golden standard at 41%. But Netflix is all about addictive entertainment, whereas this platform is watching my face teach stuff like all day long. So I'm even surprised why people would do that. Kind of weird. Okay, so the main thing I want to quickly bring up today is what I'm most known for, and this is something called the Octalysis Framework. And the word octalysis comes from a combination of octagon and analysis. So what it does, it breaks down all human motivation into what we call the 8 core drives. So every single thing we do is based on one or more of these 8 core drives, which means that if there's none of these 8 core drives there, there's zero motivation, no behavior happens. And then outside, there is a list of various game design techniques to bring out those core drives and drive more motivation, get us to complete more activities. And this is usually a pretty busy chart. So at the beginning, we really just focus on what these 8 core drives are. And so what we tend to do is, besides understanding what these 8 core drives, there's also different natures of these core drives. So there's some, and I'm going to go through them in a bit more detail after this, but there's what we call white hat motivation core drives, which makes people feel powerful, in control, they feel good, but there's no sense of urgency. So people tend to procrastinate. And then there's the black hat motivation core drives, which makes people feel urgent, obsessed, sometimes even addicted, but it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths if that was the only motivation, because they feel like they weren't in control of their own behavior. And then we're going to look at, on the left side, we have extrinsic motivation versus the right side, we have intrinsic motivation. So I'm going to go through these 8 core drives relatively quickly, just what they are, go a little bit more color on the white hat versus black hat, intrinsic versus extrinsic. And then we're going to talk more about potentially something more, which we call the remote framework. So the first one is what we call epic meaning and calling. So this is the drive where we feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and we feel like we're really driven by that. So one of the examples I give is Wikipedia. A lot of people, we all know that people don't make money when they contribute to Wikipedia, but they don't even update their resumes, advance their careers, right? A lot of people spend 1 to 3 hours every day after work updating Wikipedia because they feel like they're protecting humanity's knowledge, something bigger than themselves. And so in a game, you'll often see this theme. In the game, it says, oh, the world's about to end, and somehow you're the only person qualified to save the world. It's feels very exciting and motivating. You want to jump in and do it. So this core drive deals with things like faith and religion, changing the world, helping third world countries, higher purpose like meaning, and why people die for their countries, or honor. It all fits into this theme. Or you buy Tom's shoes and you donate to third world country. So that's epic meaning and calling. Core drive 2 is development and accomplishment. So this is a drive that says, because we feel like we're improving ourselves, we're progressing, and we are reaching new accomplishments, we feel very engaged. So if you know a little bit about gamification, you'll probably have heard of the concept of points and badges and leaderboards, and we call them PBL. So most of them fit into this core drive. Points are just literal numbers that are just counting. And so basically, by itself, it doesn't mean a lot, but it just signifies a sense of progression. Even though you're doing the same behavior over and over and over again, at least you see this number going up or this progress bar moving, and you feel like you're getting somewhere. Badges are what we call achievement symbols. So they symbolize a sense of accomplishment. And achievement symbols can be in many different forms. Could be badges, could be trophies, or uniform changes, could be white belt, black belt in martial arts, and as an extension, Six Sigma. But the key thing is it must symbolize an accomplishment. If you give people a badge for every silly thing they do, then it actually loses. It actually feels insulting, right? It's just an icon right there. Core drive 3 is empowerment of creativity and feedback. So this is kind of like Lego. You give users the basic building blocks, and there's an infinite amount of ways for them to utilize their creativity, come up with different strategies, see feedback, and then go back and adjust. And so this is the core drive that's all about meaningful choices, strategy, autonomy, self-expression. And you'll see later that this is on the right top of the octagon, which means this is a white hat intrinsic motivation core drive. And this is the longest lasting type of motivation. Every timeless game in the market has this. We call it evergreen mechanics. So if you look at poker, you look at chess, you look at mahjong or golf, it has this core drive. So if you just look at something like chess, right? Very simple game. There's 64 squares, 32 pieces that people have been playing for centuries, and it's still fun today. Chess doesn't have to be like every week, hey, here's a new piece, here's a new board, here's a new map, a new hero enters the scene, right? Chess does not need to create more content to become because to stay fun, because our brains are entertaining itself. So it's like being an inventor or scientist, lifelong experimentation. Whereas some other games that rely on other core drives, the moment they stop doing their weekly new mission or content, people stop playing them. Core drive 4 is ownership and possession. So this is basically saying that because we feel like we own something, we want to improve it, we want to protect it, we want to get more of it. And so this deals with things like virtual goods, and also deals with things like why we like to collect stamps or baseball cards. It also ties into things that are a bit more abstract, like if you spend a lot of time customizing your Facebook profile, your Dropbox folder, your LinkedIn profile, you feel more attachment, hence ownership over that experience and that product. And so even if a new technology that comes out that's supposedly better, we don't want to switch because, you know, that product doesn't understand me. This one does. This one's my product. And so that ownership creates that attachment. Core drive 5 is social influence and relatedness. So this is very straightforward. Everything you do based on what other people do, think, or say. So this deals with things like competition, collaboration, group quests, social appreciation, gifting. It also has this relatedness piece. So for instance, if you see a product that reminds you of your childhood, so there's nostalgia, you have a higher chance of buying the product. If you meet someone from the same hometown, you have a higher chance of striking up a deal with that person. Core drive 6 is scarcity and impatience. So this basically says we want something simply because we can't have it or it's very difficult to obtain. And so if grapes are on the table, you know, I might not care about it. I might eat a few because it's convenient, but I don't value those grapes. But if it's locked behind a glass shelf just beyond my reach, and it has all these big locks and bolts there, I would constantly be thinking about it, wondering like, why is it locked behind this glass shelf? Can I have them? When can I have them? Are they even sweet? And so this is a tech that Facebook used when it started. Facebook said, hey, in 2004, Facebook.com is only for Harvard students. If you don't go to Harvard University, too bad, can't use Facebook. And then it says, all right, well, you know, Facebook is open to Harvard, some other Ivy League schools, and some other schools that your high school buddies got in, but you were not smart enough to get it, too bad. And then it opened up to more and more schools. So it went up to UCLA, where I attended in 2004. Everyone rushed in, not because they already knew how great Facebook was, because no one has tried it before, but that sheer exclusivity alone made people want to join. You're not allowed to do it? Okay, now you're allowed to do it, and everyone wants to rush in. Core drive 7 is unpredictability and curiosity. So this one is because we don't know what's going to happen next, we're always thinking about it. So this is obviously heavily utilized in the gambling industry, but whenever you have like a sweepstakes program, a lottery system, a raffle ticket system, it uses core drive. It's also the drive that makes us want to finish a book or a movie, which is why we don't like spoilers. When the sports game if we know the ending, people just start leaving the arena. And there's a lot of scientific research behind this core drive. The most famous one is called the Skinner box. So scientists B.F. Skinner put different animals in a box, mouse or a pigeon. And in the box, there's a lever. So the first experiment is that whenever the mouse presses the lever, food comes out. And what you'll see is that the animal will constantly be pressing the lever, regardless if it's hungry or not, because it's just messing with, or the animal at this point, the first experiment, the animal will only press the lever until it's no longer hungry, because it doesn't need food anymore, right? So it's like, it's full, I'm full, I don't need food, I'm not gonna press the lever. But in the second experiment, when they change the mechanic to the point where whenever the mouse presses the lever, food may or may not come out, and sometimes two will come out. What you'll see there is that the mouse will be constantly pressing the lever, regardless if it's hungry or not, because now it's messing with its brain, like, will it come out, will it come out? And there you have a little bit of gambling addiction right there in the Skinner box. In the early days of gamification, some critics will say, oh, look, giving people these points and badges is like putting people in the Skinner box. And that's actually not precise, because if you were paying attention, points and badges, if done well, is about core drive to develop an accomplishment. What the unique insight about the Skinner box is not that points or badges or rewards or incentives drives obsessive action. It's that variable rewards, unpredictable results drive obsessive behavior. And you'll see later why this is what we call a black hat motivation. Core drive 8 is loss and avoidance. So this is very straightforward. You're doing something to avoid a loss. You don't want something bad to happen. This is the fear core drives. Dictators love it. It's very, people don't want it to get killed, so they do something. They don't want to lose money to avoid late penalty fees, and they do that. Pretty straightforward. There's also this avoidance piece, which is what I call like status quo sloth. Like you need to change your behavior. You need to go to the gym more. You already pay for it, but just kind of going with your behavioral inertia, and you don't get to it. So basically, those are the 8 core drives of the Octalysis framework, and it's worth reminding people that based on my research, everything we do is based on one or more of these 8 core drives, which means that if there's none of these 8 core drives there, there's zero motivation. No behavior happens. And then, like I mentioned, the top 3 core, there's this different natures. There's the top 3 core drives. I call them white hat motivation. So if you're always doing something because you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, you're changing the world, and you're improving yourself, achieving mastery, and you use your creativity and feeling very empowered, feels very, very good, right? And the problem is there's no urgency because you can do whenever you want. You're empowered. So we tend to procrastinate and do more urgent things. The bottom ones are what we call black hat motivation core drives. So if you're always doing something just to avoid a loss, just because you can't have something or because you don't know what's going to happen next, it's extremely powerful in driving our behavior. But in the long run, it leaves a bad taste in our mouths because we feel like we're not in control of our own behavior. And so when we can escape the system, we will want to. So white hat motivation is usually good for long-term customer loyalty, creative work environments, for collaboration and long-term kind of engagements. Black hat motivation is good for short, like one-time transactions. You just want people to give you their credit card. They donate money once, or a short burst of activity. Having a 1 or 2 week competition tends to be pretty thrilling. White hat motivation are things we want to do on a day-to-day basis. So, and if we end up doing it, it actually makes us happy. So do things that get us closer to our faith or make a difference in the world, right? Improving our skills and pursue a hobby. But what we end up doing all day long are the black hat activities. So, oh, tomorrow there's a deadline, got to do that. Oh, here's an exclusive offer, have to do that. Unpredictable and curiosity. Oh, what's on Facebook? What's on Game of Thrones? And so we get sucked into the black hat environments, and we end up doing all of that. But at the end of the day, we don't feel happy. And this theme of white hat versus black hat will probably be very relevant in the conversation we're going to have soon here about how to motivate yourself when you're working remotely or your team in general. But then we have the left versus right dynamic. So the left side of the octagon, I call them left brain core drive. It doesn't mean it's geographically on the left side of the brain, but it symbolically represents our logical brain versus the right brain core drives that symbolically represent emotional brain. And the left brain core drives tend to deal with extrinsic motivation, things you do for a reward, a purpose, or a goal, but you don't necessarily enjoy the activity itself. So once you obtain the reward, you hit your goals, or you get used to the reward, it feels stale, you stop doing the behavior. Whereas the right brain core drives are the intrinsic motivation core drives, where you just like to do that. You would even pay money just to experience it. And if you lost all your progress the next day, you would still want to do it, the activity today. So for instance, social influence. A lot of people, since they were in middle school, let's say, they hang out with the same two to four friends for hours every single day. And it never gets old, right? And there's no progress, there's no reward, there's no incentive, there's no, oh, friendship score increased by 20, right? There's no like, oh, you get loyalty points for that, right? But people just like doing it, it's evergreen. And even most people, when they're adults, they even say, oh, I wish I could go back to those days where I just hang out with my friends every day for hours, right? And so that's intrinsic, there's no reward or goal needed. And then there's also core drive 7, unpredictability and curiosity. So here's an example. If you sit there and you press a button for 4 hours straight and you're guaranteed a paycheck, that's kind of boring, right? That's like a job at a factory. Most people don't like that. But if you sit there and you press a button for 4 hours straight, and maybe you'll get a paycheck, maybe you won't, maybe you'll even lose money. Suddenly that's casino gambling. A lot of people like that. And it makes no sense, right? Same behavior. One, you're guaranteed a payout. The other one, you're actually most likely going to lose money. That's how the casino makes so much money. But our brains prefer the latter because we intrinsically enjoy that feeling of, oh, maybe I'll win, maybe I'll win. What about this time? So we're literally paying the casino for that feeling. And so my friends will come out and say, hey, Yu-kai, I lost $200, but that was so much fun. Let's come back next week, right? So that's still intrinsic. So that's like a big summary of a high-level view of the Octalysis, understanding white hat motivation is black hat, intrinsic and extrinsic, and understanding not just how to create motivation and behavior, but also understand the right type of motivation behavior. There's tons of companies who, especially if they're following data-driven design, they do a ton of black hat because it creates immediate results. And then they make great case studies and like, look, we have all this, they raise money with it, but then they don't realize because it's black hat design, in 4 months, everyone burns out and they leave, kind of like Farmville. And so these are useful things to explore and think about. There's obviously a lot more. I wrote a 500-page book about this. If you go to Google Scholar and you search for Octalysis, you'll also find, I think, around 1,000 PhD theses and like academic journals talking about this, how it applies, whether it applies to healthcare or this or that. So if you like academia stuff, you can check it out there too. So that's the Octalysis framework. And also today, if we have time, we can also eventually talk more about this remote framework I created recently, a few months ago too. But I'm happy to have this dialogue, answer some questions, and see which rabbit hole we go into.
Perfect. Yu-kai, thank you so much for this overview. And as you were talking, I almost could see myself like mapping myself to the different quadrants and thinking like, oh, where am I in this? And do you find like yourself, if you think about this framework, is there a way that you would locate yourself in this?
Yeah, so different people have motivated more strongly by different core drives. So first of all, these 8 core drives motivate all of us. So it's just like everyone wants to feel competent, right? No one likes to feel incompetent, or everyone wants to feel socially appreciated. No one likes to feel unappreciated. If you like to feel incompetent and unappreciated, I'm pretty sure in every culture it's seen as a psychological disease. But different types have different degrees. Some cultures, some personalities, some age groups, they respond even better to certain core drives, right? Some people really are focused on epic meaning and calling change in the world. Some people are focused on, hey, just making sure they're accepted in their social circle. Some people are trying to strive for the highest goals. So most people, if they tell me their life story, what they did, I can immediately say, oh, you did this, you chose this school because of core drive to development accomplishment, because it's the most prestigious. You chose this job because of social influence. Your girlfriend was in that city, so you chose that. Then you left it for this nonprofit because of epic meaning and calling. So you're gonna trace that. A lot of people who learned Octalysis, they say it. Some people say it's like a curse, so they see these core drives everywhere now. Some people say it's like being unplugged from the matrix. They see green code everywhere, but literally every billboard you see, every email you write or read, every person trying to raise funding or whatnot, you'll see those 8 core drives, right. and you can start understanding that. So learner beware.
This just makes me wonder. Pardon?
I said, if you're learning this, beware of those consequences. You'll see core drives everywhere, and I don't know if you can turn it off or not.
Makes me wonder, like, if you are listening right now, if you want, let us know in the chat which one of these 8 core drives do you identify the most with. So what's the thing that is like driving you? For me, like, I think I'm probably 1 and 2. Like, I'm pretty much epic meaning focused. I like to do things that have a larger impact, that empower others, and like I also like to feel accomplished and get things done. So I could very much see myself in the upper realm. And with that, also what you alerted to, that people who do that are prone to procrastinate. I 100% subscribe to that, because I know it's like not always easy to get yourself up and start focusing on the immediate task, right? Which probably are more motivated, or better, like if you are like motivated by the lower regions of the framework. We have Karina here saying like 1 and 6. So that's epic meaning and scarcity. Karina, would you like to talk a little bit about how these two show up in your life? Quite curious.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think epic meaning and empowerment probably are the ones that drive me on a daily basis. But when you started speaking about how, you put in that that time value rule, like, do it now before the price goes up on Friday. I tend to fall for that 9 times out of 10. So I thought that one pegs me a little bit as well. So, but I think on a regular basis, I'm a much more 1 and 3 probably.
Yeah, so Booking.com, which is a company that I've consulted for too, or my company has, they're looking for the one-time transaction, right? Buying a ticket. So they actually do a lot of black hat. They'll say, oh, there's only 2 tickets left, and there's 12 people looking at it right now, and you have 9 seconds, 8 seconds. You're like, oh, I gotta buy it, right? So you do the desired action, what we call DA, and so they make money, but you might not feel great, right? You feel like you're rushed into it, and so now the nice thing about, or why they can get away with it, is because it's usually a low frequency transaction. And so most people forget this bad feeling after 6 months, and they're like, oh, I think last time I used Booking.com, so let me do it again. But if you're Amazon.com, that's totally different, because Amazon.com wants people to buy 3 to 5, 10 times a day, right? And if every time you bought, you have this black hat negative feeling, you will, from all the research, I believe you will not want to go on Amazon as often, and it will hurt their business metrics. So you'll see Amazon is all about core drive to development accomplishment. It's about feeling smart. I can return it so easily. I can get it so fast. I have all the information and the social influence, because social influence creates safety. Like, I want to see the reviews, right? I want to see all those, how many stars and all those things. So this is very important, because some companies say, oh, look, this other company does it, and I'm going to copy it and I'll be successful. But what they don't realize in this one case, that the frequency of the desired action would make a huge difference. And so that's why understanding the core drives in your own lives, or in a product you're working on, or a company that's trying to sell you stuff, you will be able to understand when you should do the same thing, or when you should actually do something different.
Thank you. Thanks also for explaining how it relates to different environments, because that was one of the things that when Karina shared, I was thinking, like, okay, so is it environment dependent?
Yeah. So these are triggers into our minds, right? So we're motivated by these 8 core drives. So it's almost completely an environment. So there's two things, right? The environment and how we receive it, right? And so some people, let's say, at a certain place, like let's say if they go to church, then obviously most of the time it's epic meaning calling. Now, some people fall for social influence relatedness, so they forget the faith part and they just kind of do what makes people happy. But suddenly they go to the workplace and it's all about development accomplishment. That's overachieving, and scarcity is like, oh, there's only one spot for the promotion and they're going to prove they're going to get it. So yeah, I think a lot of times the context, what role you're playing in that environment will make a big difference. And so when we think about designing for our own motivation, we are thinking about how do we do 2 things: optimize our environment and our workflow so that it has the right type of core drives to get us to do the desired action we want to do, and then also how to change our own mentality to kind of live more gamefully and be more motivated to do actions. And and that's all. Most people, again, they want to do white hat things. They aspire to white hat activities, but then they just never get to it. So they do need some black hat push to. And if they say, oh yeah, I'm inspired, I'm motivated white hat, but then you ask them, what have you been doing the past 3 days? They'll say, oh, I did this because there's a deadline. I did this because the client's project is due. I did this, blah, blah, blah. So they end up still being affected by the black hat more than they realize. But for instance, people want to exercise. If they exercise, they work out, they'll feel core drive to development accomplishment, right? But it's never urgent, right? It's those things that are important but not urgent. So what people do is sometimes they hire a gym trainer, and a gym trainer, obviously that's social influence, but also a lot of loss and avoidance, where some of them just yell at you and say, like, you're eating dirt, you suck, why are you doing push-ups? And you don't feel great about it, right? It's black hat, but you thank them afterwards, because you say, thank you for pushing me harder than I ever could myself. And so because the black hat core drive 8 loss and avoidance led people back to the white hat core drive to development accomplishment. And so if it's a goal that people actually want to do themselves, people are okay with black hat. They actually voluntarily put themselves in black hat environments. What people don't like is when marketers, employers, governments, educators, parents use a lot of black hat to motivate, to get them to buy things they don't need or work overtime without proper compensation, get manipulated. And a lot of people still do the behavior because, again, this stuff is obsessive, but they feel bad. So the moment they can escape, they will want to. Loyal customers buy competitive products, employees leave because it's now a cutthroat environment. Sometimes children run away from home if the parenting strategy is all black hat. So it's just understanding, that, hey, if you want to use black hat, it better be something that they already wanted to accomplish themselves, what they want to do. And if that's done, then they actually feel very happy about it.
One thing that came up here that I just wanted to ask you as the last question before we go into the second part is from Kim, who asks, does a person's belief structure impact their preferred types? So is there kind of a match between belief structures and types of motivation?
Yeah, so definitely belief structures make a difference. So for instance, when I work with Scandinavian companies and cultures, they believe in more, creative play and freedom. And so they very much like core drive 3 empowerment of creativity and feedback. But sometimes, I work with German companies, and German companies, sometimes they feel like, fun is evil. Life is about perseverance through hardship, and it's about efficiency. So you have to kind of do something different. The Japanese culture, a lot of it is, especially more traditional. Now, a lot of cultures are like equalizing because of the online culture, but it's a lot about epic meaning and calling. So they will have the theme about dying for honor, or even just, hey, I'm just a small part in the bigger organization society. I need to fit into this bigger thing and not try to be the superhero myself. The US, more individualism. I need to be a superhero that saves the day. So working with different cultures, different belief systems, there definitely be a difference in how we would design the experience. So what I'm showing right now is basically, I have in other longer 3-day workshops, I talk about, how the Octalysis can be used to analyze different other frameworks. This one is relevant because Maslow's hierarchy, I think this is the most famous psychological framework. I think most people have seen this. But if you see this one, core drives 1, 2, 3 on the top, 4 and 5 are in the middle, 6, 7, 8 are on the bottom. So you can literally just overlay Octalysis framework on top of it. And the reason is because the top, or let's just start with the bottom of the pyramid and the Octalysis framework is usually what they call the reptilian brain, the primitive crocodile brain, and it deals with surviving. So things like, avoiding danger, right? Going after scarce resources or exploring new lands, that helps us survive. And the reason why we feel like we're not in control of this behavior is because we feel like we're hardwired to respond to these things for survival. But then we don't feel happy. We feel like we're animals. So the top of the Maslow's hierarchy and the Octalysis framework is more about the neocortex, the human thinking brain. So that's about, what is the purpose of my life? Poetry, how do I express myself? And if we spend more time doing that, we actually feel happier. We feel more like humans. And so, we can connect that to behavioral economics or Robert Cialdini's principles. So it's the hook model. Depending on what you've learned in the past, a lot of people's like, wow, I didn't know these things can connect. This is Daniel Pink's Drive book. So just thought it'd be interesting to show some people.
Beautiful, thank you. And I think it also speaks to this idea of like different cultures and how different cultures value different things. For example, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how this can like be mapped back to like different motivators, so different drivers. With that, I want to come to the second part of what we're here to discuss today. And Yu-kai has developed a framework that builds on this, which is much more linked to the situation that we're all facing right now, which is remote work. And Yu-kai, I would love to hear about the framework. You already teased it a little bit before we started today's session. So I'm looking forward to learn about your remote work and culture framework.
Yeah, so a quick background is I have a fun goal in my life to create 100 frameworks and models. I seem to have a talent to take something that's pretty abstract and turn it into something that's a visual tool or model. And I right now I think I have about 28 of them now. I don't know if any of them could be as good as the Octalysis framework, and I think I'm very lucky and blessed to have stumbled upon that framework. But this one is the remote framework, which became very useful and topical recently in the last 3-4 months. And so I've been an entrepreneur for I think 16 years maybe. And out of those 16 years, only I think a year and a half did I have a physical office working physically with my coworkers. So even before COVID-19, working remotely has been my norm. For my company, Octalysis Group, we recruit people online. So it happened to design challenges. So, one person's from Colombia, one's in Paris, one's in the UK. We have someone in Brazil. So we're kind of all over the place anyway. And so it's always came really natural. And then until COVID hit, I realized how many companies and people, they're not used to this type of working environment. And a lot of big companies, they just don't know what to do. They've never done it before. And individuals, they find it hard to motivate them because when you're working at home, there's two aspects, right? There's the psychological, cultural aspect, which is you feel less like a team, you feel less connected to people, and sometimes it leads to that isolation, anxiety, and depression. And the second part is the productivity aspect, which is there's so many distractions at home. We know everything's a trigger, even if your bed's a trigger to remind you to lie down, your TV's a trigger to remind you to watch something. Everything triggers your brain to consider doing other things. And so I thought it'd be useful to really crystallize the experience that I've had, and also with the behavioral knowledge, the gamification stuff that we've come up with in the past, to make a framework that companies can use to create value. And I think, again, I published it on, I just put it up on LinkedIn, I think 3 months ago. And then I got a bunch of, let's say a bunch is like 7 invitations to podcast interview speeches online within 2 weeks, and a request to write a book about it. So it seemed to be quite useful for the times. And so the remote framework is an acronym, as you can see here, which is responsiveness, expression, momentum, openness, team play, and enjoyment. And so, I guess we don't have to, it's typed up there, we don't have to go through all the details, but the goal is to make sure that people feel like there's someone in the same place. People have ways to express them. So not every coworker email is like a to-do list. You're not just a text. You're actually a real human being that has a personality that can bond with each other. And it's funny because my own company, again, sometimes we work with people who haven't met physically at all. I remember I was working with a guy from Brazil for 2 years, and then we started doing a yearly retreat. That one was in Germany, in Hamburg. And then the whole team was guessing whether this guy would be a tall guy or a short guy, because we talked to him every week for 2 years, but we only see his face on a webcam. We don't know if he's tall or short. So that was kind of a funny moment. But we've done but I've seen my team, they even take sacrificial actions for each other. So, sometimes we have a project and it's allocated to, who gets how much revenue. And we have people actively say, hey, I'm allocated this, but I think this other person on the team, he did a lot more than you realize. It's not getting credit. So I would decrease my allocation, they would get more. So, we see that kind of cultural building, that fellowship. And so that expression is important. Openness, encouraging openness and vulnerability. We have people on that team who just really shares what they feel insecure about, what they're happy about. And I think they bond through that. By the way, openness there's 2 aspects. One is personal vulnerability and organizational transparency, right? So, and usually has to start from the top. So you'll see other ones are create, give, design, right? This one is encourage openness, because you can't make people be open. You can only encourage it. And the only way is starting from the top. People are open, they show vulnerability, they have good transparency, and it happens. Momentum is really about productivity. So it's about all the things we know about optimizing little behavioral triggers. There's this art about having a messy desk versus a clean desk. The quick summary is a messy desk makes you more creative, a clean desk makes you more productive. There's how to create different, how to align different actions together. So I have another framework called the lifestyle inertia design, which is setting up the right inertia in your workplace. So you don't need discipline anymore. You don't need even any motivation, just kind of go along with your flow. and you'll get a lot of things done. And then at the end, it's more into that gamification stuff. It's team play. So get your coworkers to do small team play activities, online board games, let's say, or guessing games. So you get to understand each of the strengths and tendencies, and you build that chemistry, so that when you actually face a project together, you've already practiced. And this is literally why our brains attract games. It's practice. Why a lot of kids like fighting games. Back in the day, fighting is very important and useful. Why there's social games, right? Socialing is something that needs practice. There's building empire, building village games, right? So playing a game is actually just practicing for something that's useful later on in real life, and when the stakes are very low, very low. Or it's practice for when the stakes are very high, and playing the game has no stakes at all. And then finally, it's enjoyment, which is gamifying your day-to-day activity. So whereas team play is going out of the way and creating these little play activities with their teammates, whereas enjoyment is about making your day-to-day activity itself more enjoyable and interesting through those 8 core drives. So yeah, and then so that's the higher level of the remote. And then we know that for each of them, there's 3 layers. There's the tools layer. What tools can you use to improve responsiveness? What tools can you use to improve expressive and momentum? Then there's the triggers, what reminds us to apply these elements, and the cultural layer, which is the company or environment, that the culture, the norm that makes this more possible. So yeah, that's again a pretty big summary of the remote framework. And of course, the end result is increased productivity and higher team morale.
I'm wondering, given this framework that you shared, what would be a good way to start with this? So there was a share in the chat here, which was about 5 months ago, I was kind of motivated by trying to work online and doing all these things. But by now it feels socially isolating, depleting, and it feels hard to maintain the momentum. So in that state, I always think okay, a framework like this is great, but where do you start? So do you have any ideas or tips on where people can start to actually make a difference in their workplace?
Yeah, it kind of depends on where they're at right now and what they're doing. If their projects are all solo work or they actually do team work, right? But a good place to start is just to do a quick checklist, right? Responsiveness. Do you have this responsive in your tools, right? Do you have? And so, for instance, one example is if you, and this whole idea is about responding quickly so that it feels like as much as possible in real life. Because sometimes in the office, you walk to a coworker and you say, hey, what do you think about this? They say, oh, I think this. Oh, but how about this? And you can do 10, 20 back and forth very quickly, right? And you feel connected to an individual, and you get a lot of stuff, that 20 back and forth. In virtual environment, it could be, you send the first email, what do you think about this? And then at the end of the day, your coworker responds, I think this. And the next morning you say, but what about this, right? And this 20 back and forth that happened in 1 minute is now 2 weeks worth of conversation. And you feel very disconnected to the people, to the person you're interacting with. Mm-hmm. And so responsiveness is how to do that fast. And one of the big things I tell people is, if you notice that you're just using a chat platform, going back and forth, don't afraid, just call them up. Just call them, start talking, hearing their voice. That's, a lot of times that solves a ton of problems. Just picking up the phone and just calling them, or just doing a Skype or line call meeting, whatever you want. So just to check with expression, are you finding ways for yourself to express yourself in the work environment if you're interacting with others? Again, this is different depending on if you're working with others, and whether they're on your own team or you're working with clients, let's say, right? That's all very different. But expression, so, some people have all these Zoom backgrounds. If you look at Snap Camera, there's all these weird, funny things people can do now. And again, if you're with a client that expects full professional, attire, then can't pull it off so well. But the background, I've never met a client who says, oh, why do you have this virtual background? And they feel upset. They feel, oh, that's really cool, and it fits my theme. But there are client meetings or team meetings where we use different technology and tools to have some people make their eyes way bigger, or they turn into a donkey. It's just kind of weird, but it's kind of fun. Makes people happy. That's the thing, right? Momentum. I think this is a big thing because it requires understanding human motivation, the brain more. But I think a lot of it goes back to the Octalysis Framework, where it depends on if you're trying to get yourself to do things in a quick sprint, and it's always a balance. So, for instance, one way that people the one people use to motivate somebody is do a wager. Basically, this is what it is. You give your friend $100 and you say, hey, I have this goal. I'm going to complete this thing in 2 weeks or a month, whatever. If I don't complete it, keep the $100, right? So now there's social influence and there's loss and avoidance. And so this gets a lot of people to really push hard and get done. And sometimes your friend will be helpful and they'll say, hey, if you actually meet the goal, I'll even put in $50 on my own to reward you. I want to see you succeed, depending on how good your friend is. And so this, but keep in mind, we immediately recognize that this is social influence and loss and avoidance, more towards black hat. This is great if you want to get something done in 2 weeks or a month. But if you do it for every single little project over time, you will feel like that's a lot of stress. That's like, that does not make you happy unless again, you use it to finish I use some of these tactics to help me finish my book, right? 500 pages. But if that's not your issue, feel like you have already, if your issue is you're getting a lot of stuff done because there's all this black hat motivation, you just want to feel happier, then it's time to think about, okay, social influence is in the middle, right? It could be white hat, depending on which is collaboration, social appreciation, and it could be black hat, which is competition and peer pressure. So it's like, how do you get to be more socially appreciating? How do you have more creativity, empowerment of creativity and feedback, and just kind of build that more to how do you have even more storytelling, narrating of your own life? That tends to help you be more upbeat in the day-to-day tasks on your activities. So again, I think it's just kind of going through these remote framework, openness and whatnot, and then also thinking through those 8 core drives. I know I'm suddenly dumping 2 whole frameworks and it's hard to even understand one in a week, let alone in this 1 hour. So,
and I loved how you illustrated actually taking the remote framework as an analysis tool and then seeing like, okay, what is fulfilled, what's not fulfilled as a first indicator, and then use the Octalysis framework as a way to actually start to think, okay, how can I gamify this aspect of my remote work? And I have like a question from Erin here that I want to attend to, because we talked a lot about the individual, and she wonders how what your thoughts are regarding quickly creating a climate for co-creation and flow to solve challenging tasks as a team. So how do you create that environment that allows everybody to be part of it, I assume, and to feel engaged in it?
Yeah, so co-creation, the core of it is, again, core drive 3, empowerment, creativity, and feedback, right? You are empowered, you can make a difference with your meaningful choices, you're co-creating together. And also there's social influence. And this is more, like I think, say, a collaborative kind of environment, right? So that's where white hat. Most co-creation projects are meaningful, right? It actually is useful. So there is that epic meaning and calling. The key thing, though, is a lot of people, this needs to be reinforced through messaging and whatnot, that a lot of people, when they join a company, start doing a project, the epic meaning and calling is there, and they get more into the what and the how, the day-to-day, and they kind of forget about the epic. Like they don't, obviously if they think about it, they'll recall it, but it no longer affects them from a day-to-day standpoint. And so it's good to reinforce the epic, remind like, hey, we're getting closer to accomplishing this goal and making the world better. And I think that's a strong leader often inspires people and reminds this epic meaning calling very, very often. Whereas a weaker leader is focused on core drive 5, social influence relatedness. They're just trying to please their team. And then, if you're an insecure leader, you become an ineffective leader, right? So those are things you want to think about in terms of driving that community. Now, for this one, I tell a lot of my clients that one of the lowest hanging fruits for most projects is, again, make it easy for people to show appreciation for each other, because most people feel underappreciated everywhere they go, in their schools, in their work, at home. And if they go to an environment where suddenly they feel appreciated by people, they just want to go more often, right? That's why a lot of kids go to games too, because in real life, they get yelled at by their parents and they get bullied, whatever. And they go to the gaming world, they're powerful and strong, and everyone like the guild wants them to needs them to do this epic quest with them. So they want to go there more often, right? And so most of the time, people kind of appreciate our people or others around them, right? You kind of appreciate them, but there's no reminder, there's no reason or trigger to express that. So if you're going to create an environment, you want to make it very easy for those to express that appreciation. That's why one-click like buttons are popular, right? It's just, hey, if you make people, if you say, hey, please write a whole LinkedIn recommendation. People's like, oh, I don't know what to write at this moment. I'm too busy, and they don't do it. But LinkedIn and the Facebook, they click like. And so I have friends who say if they take a picture and they don't think they get more than 5 likes, they won't upload it on Facebook. So if you have this co-creating environment, make it easy for people to thumbs up, good kudos, and sometimes even a more very meaningful choice of kudos, right? So awesome, so creative, so helpful, like whatever. That also makes people happy. So now people giving this appreciation feels pretty happy. There's ways to express themselves, and people receiving obviously feels quite good too. And so that's the direction you can think about.
And I think it's a beautiful first step, Yu-kai. And I want to say I really appreciated your session here today. I found it super informative, insightful. It offered me a ton of new perspectives. And I already had some people reaching out. It's like, is this recorded? So yes, it is recorded, and we will share it. They also were asking, this is so much good stuff. Like, how can we follow up? And for those of you who joined late, Yu-kai, what is the easiest way for people to get more of this, to dive deeper into some of your models, ideas, and theories?
Yeah, so there's a few ways to check my stuff up. I have a blog, yukaicchou.com. If you go on Google and you search gamification expert, I think I'm the first result. I'll be below the ads. If you want to read the book, again, yukaicchou.com/books takes you to Amazon. And again, the big thing that I'm pushing is they call Octalysis Prime. So the book has about 15% of my knowledge base, and people who read my book and they said, oh, what's next? I decided to create this island that I can share way more. I can continue to learn more things and share it here. So I have over 700 videos now. And this is literally like everything I've learned that's useful that I'm sharing. So this is stuff that I want my twin daughters to learn, symphony and harmony. So there are things, so a lot of it is about how to create gamification in your products, in education, but there's things like how do you find purpose in life? How to become happy? How to be an entrepreneur? How do you raise funding? How do you ask for a salary raise? So everything that I find useful that I've learned, especially with my background of understanding how the brain works and how to make ourselves happy. I share it here. So there's people who go on and say, hey, I came here to learn about game design techniques. Why am I watching about how to get healthier? This is so weird. Like, just don't look at those videos. Look at the ones that you're interested in. Octalysis Prime before was a paywall, $50 a month. But we, end of last year, we switched to a freemium. So you can actually sign up without a credit card. You can watch quite a big amount of videos there. And then at one point, when you hit a trigger, it'll say you can only watch one video a day, which is still, I think, okay for some people. Or you can upgrade and you can have unlimited access for $50 a month. So it's really up to you. I have a lot of free stuff online, so only pay if you feel like you really see that your life can be upgraded and start doing next level stuff with the stuff we're teaching here in Octalysis Prime, an OP.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you liked what you saw and you want to continue learning, please check out schoolofbecoming.org. We post sessions regularly. Also, if you want to support us, consider spreading the word. Who would benefit from this video or from one of the other videos that you have seen? Feel free to forward our content. Our ambition is to make professional development as widely accessible and affordable as possible.